Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Woman in Space seminar series. I'm Sarah Mazrui. I'm joining you from Toronto, the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this is still the home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn here. As a planetary scientist and an educator, my responsibility towards Indigenous people is to learn about Indigenous science and make space for it. And as someone who lives around the Great Lakes region, I take the responsibility to be a good steward for the land that I inhabit. I'm really excited about today's seminar series, Race in Space. We've got Anna and Ashley with us, who will discuss data surrounding the lack of representation in astro and planetary sciences, Ashley's successful initiative, Black in Astro, and topics pertaining to systemic racism within academia. Anna Gifty Apoke O Ajamen is a researcher, entrepreneur, writer, and speaker hailing from Ghana and Maryland. She's an alumni of Harvard University, where she was a research scholar in economics with an appointment at the National Bureau of Economic Research and the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where she earned her bachelor's in mathematics and a minor in economics. She's best known for her work with the Sadie Collective, which she co-founded with Fanta Traore, and the Blackbirders Week, which she also co-founded alongside with Black AF in STEM community. Her work is frequently featured by media outlets such as CNN, the New York Times, NPR, the Economist, the Wall Street Journal, and she is currently represented by the Leila Campoli at Stone Sung Press LLC. You can also follow her on Twitter at Afronomics. We've also got with us our other great panelist, Ashley Walker, who is an astrochemist, a planetary scientist, and a science communicator. She received her bachelor's in chemistry with an astrochemistry emphasis from Chicago State University. And she has interned at Harvard University and Johns Hopkins University, understanding the ice chemistry of early planet forming disks and understanding the aerosol analogs on Saturn's moon Titan. She's currently interning at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Spice Lab. In the Spice Lab, she specializes in ice chemistry on the stratosphere on icy moons, and she has been featured in an array of interviews, which include Scientific American, BBC's America's Space Week, Katie Couric's Thank You Note, and the Adler Planetarium's My Adler Story. She advocates for students and highlights Black junior scientists during Black History Month. She's also the founder of #Black in Astro Week and a committee member of the Women of Color Project. You can follow her on Twitter at that_astro_chic or on Instagram, Ashley the Astrochemist. Without any further ado, I'm going to change hostship to Anna so that she can share her screen and bring all of you lovely people up to date. All right, here we go.
Good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing? I guess nobody can respond. But thank you all so much for coming through. We are so excited to have you. Today we are going to be talking about race in space. That was sort of like a rhyming joke, but I guess it doesn't land, but that's okay. It's really a conversation about representation, allyship, and doing better. As I was introduced, my name is Anna Gifty Apoku Ajamin. I go by Anna, and I would love to turn it over to my wonderful colleague to also introduce herself briefly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Walker, otherwise known as Ashley Lindelia. I know a lot of people be like, is it Ashley Lynn? Is it Lindelia? It's Lindelia. Okay, it's my middle name. Um, and again, we're here to talk about race and space. I am in academia, the academic realm, and I'm in planetary astronomy as well. So let's get it started, Anna.
Fantastic. Give me 1 second. We just want to make sure that we are accommodating folks. I'm actually looking for the closed captioning option and I'm not seeing it for a second. Let me see if, not sure what's going on there. Okay. Sarah, if you don't mind just kind of giving us an update on what you do on the back end, and then I will adjust as needed. Okay. We're going to continue though. So you just met us. So Ashley and myself. I didn't introduce myself with regards to my social media handles. So I'm It's Afronomics on Twitter, but I'm also Anna Gifty O on Instagram, which is more pictures, as you can imagine. I'm the co-founder of the Sadie Collective. The Sadie Collective is the first organization that specifically addresses the dearth of Black women in economics and related fields, but I spent a lot of my time talking about diversity and inclusion and why it matters. So that's kind of why I've been brought into this space. But today we're really going to be hearing from Ashley, who is somebody that is an expert in the space and has done a lot of great work in terms of helping us really think about representation within the aerospace.
So again, my name is Ashley Walker, that Astro Trick on Twitter, and I'm the founder of Black and Astro Week and the current co-founder of Black and Kim Week, which is coming up in August.
Awesome. So we're going to begin with a quote, and the quote is, "Their dark skin, their gender, their economic status, none of those were acceptable excuses for not giving the fullest reign to their imaginations and ambitions." This is Margot Lee Shetlery, the author of Hidden Figures. I know that many of you are familiar with Hidden Figures, but for those who don't know too much about it, it's a story about some incredible Black women who were instrumental in ensuring that the NASA space mission was possible. Many people know Katherine Johnson specifically just because she recently passed, but she also received a Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama before he ended his presidency. So this quote is really encapsulating the experiences of Black women. Oftentimes we are told that we can't imagine, we can't wonder. And so today we're really going to have an honest conversation about how racism and representation sort of intertwine in the aerospace, and kind of thinking critically about how do we move forward in terms of ensuring that Black life within this context is uplifted and celebrated. So we're first going to begin with a topic called racism and power. There's this question that a lot of people have asked sort of in passing or implicitly. And the question is, can you be nice and still be racist? And it's a question that we want to get into a little bit today to kind of kick things off. And then we'll sort of narrow in as time goes on. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this topic. So as I mentioned before, I'm somebody who spends a lot of time on Twitter sort of talking about really big themes that affect the academic and professional spaces, despite sort of the discipline. And one of those themes that I touched on a couple weeks ago was systemic racism. It was one of those off the dome Twitter threads that really came from a place of trying to understand why people couldn't understand racism. And so honestly, it was more so about kind of bringing more clarity around the issue. Obviously, you know, Black folks understand how this works within society, but there are a lot of folks who don't. And so Saturdays are for breaking down systemic racism. And what I've gone ahead and done is also include a link that I'll send you, I also include a link that will also send you directly to the Twitter thread that I'm referring to and the tweets that we'll be discussing today. So the first tweet, I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what it means, unpack it a little bit. So the first tweet is, racism is really about power and recognizing that you have the power to be racist without repercussions. Sorry, that was my mom. So essentially, that's where the repurposed idea of Karen came from. And white people may be nice, but when it becomes a question of power in the face of racism, how do they use it? So we're going to break down the first part, and then we'll go into the second part. The first part is understanding that racism is really about kind of the power that you have inherently and how you exercise that power. I know a lot of people often say, well, I'm not a bad person, so I can't be racist. And that's really not what it's about. It's not necessarily about a moral failure, though that is definitely one component of it. But it's also about thinking about how you sit within the power structure that currently exists. And what that means is understanding how your race, your gender, your ethnicity, and perhaps your sexuality and religion kind of play a role into uplifting your privilege. When we're talking about racism, we're talking about how your race inherently is tied to who gets power within a given system. So when we talk about racism in the context of America and in the Western civilization, we're really talking about white people being born, with sort of their whiteness, and their whiteness being tied to the power that they have within the system. So that's sort of the first part about racism and understanding how power sort of intersects with that. When we talk about, having the power to be racist without repercussions, and we bring in the idea of Karen, a lot of you have seen over social media that Karen is sort of the, I want to say a word, but I'm going to just say like the depiction of white privilege, in the sense that individuals who are dubbed as Karen are folks that know that if they exert some aspect of vulnerability in conjunction with the whiteness that allows them power to be believed, they can endanger life, right? And so when we're talking about the life, we're talking about Black lives, we're talking about brown lives. But the idea here is Karen sort of represents how people can weaponize white privilege and endanger other folks' life, especially in the modern context. So I know a lot of us are familiar with the most recent scenario that went global, the Amy Cooper situation. That's actually how Black Birders Week was born out of. Christian Cooper's situation with Amy Cooper in Central Park in New York, where she was accusing him of endangering her life, even though there was a good 7 feet between them, even more. So this idea of power and being able to use it within a system and not being questioned because people believe that you are doing something inherently good. The next part is white people may be nice, but when it comes to the question of power in the face of racism, how do they use it? So this is really a red pill, blue pill situation. If you haven't watched The Matrix, first of all, you're more than a decade late. Please catch up. But the other part is to think really critically about, if you have power and if you recognize the power that you have, how do you go about using that power? Do you use that power to survive as you are without thinking about how that power is allocated disproportionately amongst different groups? Or do you think about that power more critically with respect to how do I help uplift marginalized groups that don't get equal access to this power that I inherently possess because of my race? And so those are two things that I definitely want us to think about as we enter the discussion soon. The last tweet that I wanted to touch on is the tweet that kind of ends this thread. Now, granted, there's a couple other tweets after this, but that was just because I was going off. But when we talk about sort of the biggest point of this thread, it's really about, being nice is not the same thing as not being racist, right? And a lot of times when we say that racism is a personality trait, then that being nice somehow seems to cancel that. Being racist is not about, being a bad person, though there's definitely bad people who are racist, but it's really about power, who has it, and how you use your power to uplift and amplify certain communities. What I will say is that if you are not actively dismantling systems that exclude marginalized groups, that's sort of where the racism and power comes into play, you are complicit. Now, I was yelling here because I was very excited and very passionate about this, but I'm saying this from sort of my perspective right now that you are complicit, right? If you are in an academic setting or a professional setting and you see that your white colleague is berating somebody who doesn't have that much power within that specific system, within that specific context, and you don't say anything, you've made a decision. Silence is still a decision. And so a lot of times when we talk about racism and power, we're really talking about how are you making decisions that are aligned with making sure that marginalized groups are able to get, their voices heard and able to get the power that they need to move the needle forward. So as I ended here, I said, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. And that's actually a great ending too, because I'm going to pass it on to Ashley, who is going to go into a little bit of discussion. Oh, go ahead, Ashley.
So there are currently 22 African-American women over the course of 39 years who have earned a PhD in astronomy and planetary science in the United States. Only 22. And this tells a tale of, we hear, certain groups say, well, we're marginalized too, and we're underrepresented. I want to be clear that there's a difference between underrepresented, low number, and marginalized. And this is something a lot of people seem to give, a lot of people tend to give, like, they typically don't understand the differences. And so, because they don't understand the differences between the two, they often say, well, I'm underrepresented and I'm this and I'm that. And really, a lot of the times they're not underrepresented. Okay, so we want to make sure that folks understand the difference between underrepresented and marginalized groups. So there's a huge difference. And so because there's only 22 black women who've ever received a PhD in astronomy and in planetary science, so anything astro adjacent, we're telling you, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix this, and I typically tell people this, and they're like, dang, you're kind of right. I said, well, if it's only 22 black women with PhDs in astronomy, that means everybody is a part of the problem. That means you didn't speak up, you stayed silent, you laughed at a joke, so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that you can internalize on what you can do better. And it's not a beat you up type of thing, but you want to see what you can do better. And so currently we just made it to a little bit over the 100th Black woman in physics mark. Congratulations big shout out to Dr. Eileen Gonzalez, who just recently received her PhD last week. And so with over the course of 47 years, there's only been just about a little bit over 100. That's it in the US. That's it. It's not that many of us. And so a lot of people, again, like to question, well, why, what are Black women doing to where they're leaving? I'm going to give you a quick hint before we move forward. It's not Black women's fault. And so I also want to shed light to the fact that to our Black men counterparts, for example, in comparison to Black men, right? Black men will, for example, this upcoming school year in 2021, we will graduate Dr. Jamila Pegues. I'm so happy for her. As the first African-American woman astrochemist in U.S. history. 60 years ago, the first African-American astrochemist graduated already. And so as you can see, this is a huge gap. But this also happened in physics with Dr. Edward Boucher and the first Black woman Dr. Willie Hobbs, that was what, 1972, and that was what, 1800s. That is a huge gap. That is a huge gap. And so we're telling you that, you know, not just with, you know, black, you know, with black women, also black men do have a similar issue with, you know, saying similar things.
Yeah.
So we just want you to be aware of the racial disparities that Black folks face, and particularly Black women.
Yeah.
Why are there so the question is, why are there so few Black women in astro and planetary scientists? Now, I just gave you a clue, so I would like to see some audience answers.
You guys can feel free to use the chat. Thank you so much. Hi.
Hi.
And it's okay if you don't know too, but I think some of you guys will get it. Think about sort of the conversation we've had just before Ashley started talking a little bit more about the astro space. These are some good answers. Okay.
Okay, any more answers before I wrap up? Okay.
Interesting.
You can keep going, Anna.
Sure.
It's similarly same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you all so much for those answers. And you're all absolutely right. Black women do not feel valued, right? I was in a space where I was told to don't do astrochemistry and do SciComm instead. Get a PhD in SciComm. And so when my former advisor told me that during undergrad, I had to look and say, do you know how many few Black women there are in astronomy in general? And so when this question came about, you know, when white folks think that they're helping, sometimes you're actually hurting. And it came from a place I felt like she knew, like, oh, you're better at this, but don't go into this, right? And I understood where she was coming from, but actually she was hurting me. And so that hurts our self-esteem, in which I started this initiative of Black in Astro to share the stories of Black bodies that are in academic spaces. We're in academic spaces and we're doing our best, but you have people like me, right, who go in white spaces but have to come home to an area where I could be a Breonna Taylor or a Sandra Bland, or I can get hit by a random stray bullet just because people are shooting. So when we have these conversations, I need my white counterparts to think, like really, really think, because not all of us have a safe neighborhood to go home to.
Mm-hmm.
For Black folks in America, we do not have a safe neighborhood to go to. And so when I celebrated and told the stories of these beautiful Black astronomers, I wanted to make sure that we as a community understood what is happening. And so, and I'm also looking at the numbers of Black women and planetary scientists. And again, it's 22 Black women with PhDs in astro and the adjacent, which is planetary science, which is added. So if we section them off, the number is even lower. So we want to be mindful and think about some of the ways that we as a community can uplift and help those, and make sure we begin holding our colleagues accountable. So this is 5 ways that you can support Black scientists in physics, astro, and planetary science. Reflect. Reflect on the things that you've done that may have been harmful, that you thought were intentionally good. However, they were harmful to a Black person. And also, we can we can make this too for other Black and Indigenous people of color. So reflect on those ways that where you thought where I gave you an example, how I was told to do a SciComm because my advisor just thought that, oh, she's really good at it. But my passion is astrochemistry, and I love SciComm. Don't get me wrong. I'm probably gonna have a future in SciComm. I'm banking on that. However, I want a PhD in astrochemistry, and so that is a way where I wasn't supported. I was not supported during my last year of undergrad. Not at all. Well, the whole route, but that's another story. Another thing you can do: listen. Listen. Don't speak. Listen. A lot of times, white folks have trouble with this, and we're I know some of you see me on Twitter, like, y'all just listen, please listen. And I hope now, hearing my voice, you can actually envision my tweets now. And so just listen. And so if you actually sit down and listen and hear what we're saying, and use the reflection, as I said, number 1, this can actually lead you on to number 3. How can I help? Now, we need to be careful because there's a lot of performative allyship. A lot of performative allyship.
What's performative allyship, Ashley?
Woo! All right, this is going to be a fun one. So many of you have seen a lot of folks put Black Lives Matter and support Black people and I love Black students or whatever they have in their bio header, right? However, I've been in situations or in a group where I've been told I'll be supportive of you and I'll uplift you, and they'll pretend to do all these things, right?
Yep.
But when it comes down to it, oh baby, they are stabbing you in the back and can't wait to kick you out the group.
Yep.
Or can't wait to push you out of the department. Or in the case of one of my good friends, making sure that your opportunities have been cut short. Now, only is that performative allyship that's gatekeeping and racist. That is holding up the systematic values of white supremacy.
Yep.
And so we want to make sure that folks do not replicate these actions. There were times where I was called a racial slur, and I look up the accuser's director, advisor, whatever she was, wrote tweets off of my experience and had a talk off of my experience. But is a really big ally and advocate for people, Black and brown students.
Can I jump in here, Ashley? This is something that I've seen, I've experienced, I've recently witnessed within this past week. When we're talking about power, we're talking about who has the ability to make a decision that can alter someone's career.
Yep.
And so I mean, this goes without saying. If you are anybody who sits in power in any way, if you are overseeing anybody who is under you, that is an underrepresented minority, and that's somebody who identifies as Black or African American, Native, Latinx, and you cannot use their experiences to prop up why you are a better person.
Or use the tenure.
Okay. And, and it happens, right? We are both talking as witnesses and victims to that kind of behavior. And it's harmful in a way that if you are not careful, it will blow back on you eventually, right? Because there'll be moments like the one that we're in currently where people are going to just be laying things out in the open. And you might find, I'm not saying this is happening to any of y'all, but like you might find that individuals who engage in that kind of behavior are canceled. Now we know that cancel culture is a thing, but rightfully so. They're rightfully canceled because their behavior has been consistently bad over time. And so when we're talking about listening and reflecting and asking genuinely, how do I help? This is what allyship is about. Allyship is about understanding where your mentee is, where that person who's working under you is, as an underrepresented minority, and saying truly where you are, let me meet you there. Let me get you beyond me. Because at the end of the day, mentorship is not about getting somebody to where you are. It's about getting them beyond you. So I just wanted to add that really quick point and have Ashley continue on with the presentation.
And so I seen someone said, isn't that tokenism? Tokenism is slightly different, right? Because it's like you the only one. It's like, that's just you. And you're just like, here. It's like, here's my token Black. Here's my person. Right? So that is a little bit different. But you know, going forward to seeing, you know, these spaces, I can give you, when we talk about allyship, and I'm going to talk about share the space and retention, so I'm going to jump in and share this space. So if everyone knows Dr. Lucian Walker-Witch, because I'm pretty sure everyone knows, I always thank them all the time because I love them and they love me. They thank you, and that is definitely true too. They, you know, have been an amazing mentor to me, right? However, they use their whiteness to make sure they check other people's privilege and be like, hey, what's wrong with you?
Yep.
They use it to share the space. When there's something coming up or something that they know that I need or something that you know, Lucian feels that I'll be good for, they will put me right there where I need to be. And that's similarly of how you share the space. Also sharing the space is making sure that there are departmental changes, whether you're in academia or in other realms, because you want to make sure that your colleagues are you know, confident in saying like, I like it here. You never want to have a Black person or brown person say, I hate it here. You don't want that, right? And then you run out everybody and then you're like, well, where's the color, right? So sharing the space, you know, could also mean making sure that it's an inclusive environment. And I mean a real inclusive environment. Because you have people say, oh, it's inclusive, and you got 5 Black people, but the rest of the space is white. That ain't inclusive, because I be seeing it too. I'll see it on Twitter, like, oh, my department is inclusive. It'd be 2 Black people. Okay. So you want to make sure that it's actually really inclusive, because guess what? When you share the space, you create more retention. That means you're going to keep more Black folks in that space. You're going to keep them in the realm, and you're going to also make sure that they're happy. So retention is really, really, really big for me, because I've watched my girls leave. That is the hardest thing you have to do, is watch your friends walk out the door and say, I am not coming back.
Wow. And I want to add something really quickly to this too. You know, sharing the space is not, I'm going to pluck someone who I consider a promising Black person and place them in this space without creating any mechanisms to support said Black person. Sharing the space is not, you know, people say, well, comparatively, going to Ashley's example, 2 is better than none. Well, none is better than nothing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like none is not better than, you know, like that should not be the standard, right? period. And you have to recognize that that standard in and of itself is problematic. So you having 2 Black people out of 15 or however many, like that in and of itself is also a problem, and something that you have to be intentional about fighting against, right? When we think about the allyship, sponsorship is even another aspect of it. If you are a senior person within your organization, you have power within that organization to make important decisions that could affect the career trajectory of anybody below you. The way that sponsorship works is that you have made a commitment. Listen to what I'm saying, a commitment, not a one-time decision, not a convenient decision. Oh, it's Black Lives Matter. It's profitable to be, for Black lives. It's, it's so funny, Ashley. I was thinking about this the other day. The fact that Black Lives Matter is trending is baffling to me. The fact that the NFL has come out with statements before academic departments that supposedly educate Black students is crazy to me.
Yep.
And so we are at a point in time where the decision you make as someone who's a senior person in the organization, as an organization itself, is going to define the moral compass that leads your organization into the next decade and beyond.
Yep.
If you decide not to support Black people sustainably, it's going to show. And it's going to show in a big way. I had somebody tell me once recently, please don't tweet about this conversation. And the conversation went left. And I subtweeted. I subtweeted. But my point is,
you still did it anyway.
I said it anyway. Because my point is, that person recognized that, I don't want to be the next trending topic. But your motivation to be less anti-Black racist should not be motivated by the fact that you don't want to be a trending topic. That's not what should be motivating you. It should be motivated by the fact that you want to see the humanity of Black people be fully realized in your space. And that's what we talk about when we're discussing inclusivity and diversity. So go ahead, Ashley.
And to piggyback, a lot of people I'm realizing are scared to being called racist. But if the shoe fit, then I don't know what to say. and that, you know what I'm saying? And so retention is definitely, something that we need to focus on. And so,
yes,
exactly. I totally agree. Exactly. And so it's a checklist, and they feel like it's a checklist, and because Black Lives Matter right now, it's a trend. So I want everyone to pay attention to this application round for grad school. I want everybody to pay attention to this application for even undergrad, so on and so forth. Because fellowships, so on and so the list can go on, because it's a trend, and this is something that we're not letting die. Because typically, unfortunately, someone get killed, and then we be marching, and then we be crying, and we do all this stuff, and then it goes back to the same repeated cycle. But this time folks was rioting, so they kind of scared people, and so they're like, all right. We gotta figure out a new way to shut them up, probably, maybe, I don't know, but now it's kind of like, okay, y'all matter, right? Well, we've been mattering since the dawn of time. We've been mattering since we first stepped foot on this earth. So, that should even be a motivating factor. You're the first people here. That should be a motivating factor. And so I want to make sure that I want to make sure that everyone knows that we matter. And so going to number 5, please acknowledge the work. Please acknowledge the work of Black astronomers. And when I say acknowledge the work of Black astronomers, I mean, you definitely have to acknowledge them for all of the things that they've done. There's so many amazing, wonderful astronomers, Black astronomers, that a lot of people don't even know about.
1 second, Ashley.
Hmm.
Okay, there we go. That noise was really okay. There we go.
So, back to what I was saying. We have to acknowledge, Black astronomers, and there's some that you may not hear about. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the work of Dr. Nia Amara, who was also my mentor. The work of Dr. Lene Quick,
Mm.
the work of there's so many others. There's Dr. Fabian Bassentine. There is the work of Julie Dumas. There's the work. These are people that probably aren't on social media, and so and so you don't hear about these folks, right? These are folks that you don't hear about that are amazing. And so I actually talked to Nia earlier. She was helping me with something. She was like, "You need to fix this with that." Nia is my sister at the end of the day, and so you hear about this work, and I really want to go elaborate a little bit about Nia's work. For example, Nia owned a art gallery dedicated to social justice. She is an artist as well as an astrophysicist. So this is some of the work that they've done, and that has been very, very helpful. I met Nia in 2017 during my time at Harvard. And one thing I can say about Nia and Lene is that Dr. Lene Quick, who was at NASA Goddard, is that when I tell y'all they act like my sisters, they are my sisters. They will not let me fail or fall. And so when I talk about the work of acknowledging Black astronomers, please acknowledge their work, because a lot of it gets stolen. A lot of content gets stolen. I've seen my content get stolen. So please acknowledge the hard work that Black astronomers put into everything. And so I'm watching everyone comment about the list of astronomers of color and astronomy. One thing, I don't have all of them listed, but I will tell you this: we are doing a continuation piece on Black and Astro. So you'll hear a little bit more from these folks that I named and listed. So they'll be telling their stories as well.
Yes, and for just clarification, I know people are asking questions already. We are about to enter that section of it, but I wanted to say one more thing about what Ashley mentioned. Acknowledging work is really the name of the game here, right? And if we're talking about academic settings, citing work is incredibly important. And it oftentimes is overlooked when it comes to Black scholars in particular, especially in this space and in spaces that are typically quantitatively demanding. It's really, really important moving forward that you make a point to intentionally cite Black scholars. There are people who are doing this work. Sorry, give me one moment, please. I'm sorry. So what I'm saying is that it's intentional that we have to cite Black scholars as we are moving through our respective professions, because they oftentimes are overlooked, they are undercited, they are sort of undervalued within the scholarly space, despite having the same, if not more robust training within their respective professions. It really comes down to this idea of working twice as hard to get half of what individuals have. And this is really about Black scholars working twice as hard to get half of what white scholars have. And so when we talk about quality, the quality is there. And so, the decision to cite and to acknowledge work should be a priority moving forward, despite whether or not you are, talking about it casually, or you are, citing them academically, you need to make a point to do that. And a great place to start is Ashley's Twitter page, where she's actually pinned a list of Black astronomers to begin with. And I know that some people are mentioning some other ways that people can find Black folks who are in this space.
You can also find a lot of Black women on African American Women in Physics.com, and which is ran by Dr. Jamie Valentine, who has her PhD in physics, and she was the first African American woman to receive her PhD in physics from Johns Hopkins University.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ashley. We have learned so much from you sharing your experiences. And so we are now at the latter half of our program. We're going to spend the next 10 minutes or so taking questions. So there's a lot of questions coming in. So I'm actually going to ask Sarah to just kind of help us moderate just a little bit with identifying which questions we have time for. But that said, I wanted to go back to a question that was asked much earlier. I believe that individual is a Black woman, but I might be wrong. So essentially that person said that they had brought up these issues to their employer, but they were shunned and dismissed. So Ashley, what do you have to say about that within the context of astro and planetary science?
Well, even if it isn't, if you have other people in your department, I don't know if your students in the department that are doing a call for action, because I hear a lot of people are doing that. They're rah rah rah. I would definitely join that if they're doing a call for action. That definitely needs to go a part of it. Also, try to talk to your diversity and inclusion officer, because talking to the DNI, 9 times out of 10, the EDI person or DEI person, probably a person of color, 9 times out of 10, and see what solutions they also have as well. Those are 2 things I can think of off top of my head. But if you come to me later on tonight or tomorrow, I can definitely give you some more tips. You can come to my Twitter page, and just tweet at me, and we can go from there. And then there was another question. I am.
Are you talking about the Souls question?
Yes, in a question. Yes, in the chat. You don't see it.
Yes. I was just gonna let you. Okay, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Well, I'm reading it right now. So, I was told to use the term African American, but not Black, to talk about Black research in academia, as Black was, as I was told, considered an offensive term, or Black space. It's interchangeable. So to answer your question, she wants to know if she should use the term Black or African American. It's interchangeable, and it also depends on a person too.
I was about to say, I think it actually depends quite a bit. So, I think being Black in America is a complex thing, as I think Ashley and I kind of display, right? So I'm Ghanaian American. My parents immigrated here from Ghana. I was also born in Ghana, but I identify as Black within the American context. Now, I can't say for sure that I'm an African American, because African American has a connotation within the context of America. It's associated with sort of the historical pain that kind of was birthed through this country with regards to Black people and slavery. And so understanding that relationship as an individual really will help you define. I think a really great person who is also knowledgeable on this topic is Hannah Jones, who has done a lot of work with the 1619 Project. She kind of talks a little bit about Black Americans sort of reclaiming that and defining Blackness within the American context through that lens. But there's also folks who have issues with sort of the African American definition, because there's that African component, right? Some people might feel uncomfortable with that. So I think kind of just tempering it. But I'm not sure if Ashley has any opinions on it.
Right. So for example, I have a dear friend who is she's from Nairobi, right? She's from Nairobi. She was born in Nairobi, but she's a U.S. citizen here. So technically, she is what is considered African American because her citizenship. So that also is a play that also Anna is explaining as well. So for me, because my ancestors were slaves, and obviously, yeah, I'm here. but but for me, I personally, I had to like come to terms with using the word black, and it took me some time because I was taught to use African American.
Mhm.
And so over time, if you read about a lot of words like people of color, um, was here it described mixed black people in the slave trade times. If you look at a lot of the terms and so on and so forth, um, black people of the African diaspora in America have different types of um, names through time that we've been called, but
Absolutely.
preferably, there's majority of the time they don't mind if you say black.
Hmm.
And I want to know if this was a white person that said this to you. I want to know. I do. But sometimes, you're like, what? That don't even sound right. Any other questions?
We've got one question in the chat that I thought applies to a lot of STEM fields. Azul mentioned that they're not in astrophysics, but in molecular biology, but that they've noticed in a lot of the STEM fields during graduate recruitment weekend, you hear from a lot of folks saying, well, I don't see people like me here, which
Yeah.
is very disheartening, very shameful. What is it that we can do to encourage candidates to join? What do you think those institutions can do, and what can we do as individuals?
Pay them. Number one, compensate. A lot of folks ask students, specifically underrepresented minority students, to do things for free that you would otherwise charge a diversity consultant to do by the hour. Pay graduate students. If I'm being quite honest, they don't get paid enough. So this is something that you could very easily do to incentivize students to at least participate. And I think the other thing you need to recognize too is if your environment is not an environment that's inclusive and supportive, do not be surprised if when they come, they spill the tea, right? They're not going to lie to these students and say, absolutely, this place is great, even though they are being subjected to all sorts of structural violence, right? So you got to be careful about, oh, we want to showcase our diversity. What is the intention behind that? Are you trying to bait and switch? That's that's a whole other question, right?
Or they could be getting diversity and inclusion grants and be like, oh, we want to master you out, because that's a common thing too. And so a few ways, as I was mentioning earlier, that you can do is you can talk to your EDI person, your DEI person, or you can a call for action. Goodness, couldn't get it out. A call for action. And so, which is I'm noticing a lot of places are doing. They're like, all right, this is wrong. A lot of places are trying to be intertwined with HBCUs, MSIs, minority serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, PBIs, predominantly Black institutions, which I came from. Well, they think we're HBCUs, so we're gonna roll with punches. So on and Hispanic serving institutions. So you want to, people are trying to engage with them, but you want to make sure that it's genuine, not because our numbers are low and this is looking crazy and people are talking. You want to make sure they're doing it from the heart.
Yep.
Great, thank you for that. If you'd like to type in your questions in the chat room, feel free to do so. If you're on the phone line or don't have access to the chat, if you want to use the emoji so that we can see if you're interested, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Someone said that they seeing students getting massacred out all the time. Absolutely. I was actually told once that they were the same person that told me to do psychon. They said that they were so worried about me that I would master out of my PhD program.
Hmm.
No worries, I'm applying this round. No worries, we'll see what happens. I doubt if I'll fail.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so crazy of how expectations people put on Black students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
that is definitely an expectation, right? And so I was talking to one of my former advisors, and she really we had a heart to heart. We always have heart to hearts. And she was just like, wow, you were really failed. And I just wow, I thought you would have been okay. I was just like, no. After I had switched advisors, she was like, I told her no, it got worse. I was failed. And so, which, some people are like, don't say that. Well, whatever, I was. So many Black women and Black students are failed. And it isn't about coursework. It's about mentorship and guidance. And so what I lack in mentorship and guidance is what I'm getting now. So I'm now getting the proper mentorship and guidance and advisement that I was looking for in undergrad, which is kind of good that I'm learning this now, that I'm getting this now.
Mm-hmm.
However, we want to make sure that more Black students don't continuously have this problem, because there are students that are like that. They don't have it, and then they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to grad school.
Right. Now, a lot of people don't know that grad school is free most of the time.
That's true.
It's a lot of information.
They don't, it's a lack of information. It's a lack of resources for Black and brown students that they don't get. And so when you see them leave these departments, or they don't have the guidance,
yep,
so I came to the conclusion what was my being in astronomy. As my handle says in my bio, I'm fairy godmom of Astro. So I try to put people together. And so I try to put people together because I know I didn't have that. I had to look at everybody on my own and find everybody on my own. I can't tell you how many emails I got. I think I got 60, 70. I don't know. I just mean, hey. And so I see the question. And so going forward towards the grad school question, I always knew grad school existed. I always knew. I come from a background where my family they all have degrees. And so my aunt has a degree in chemistry and biology. And so she definitely had let me know about what was happening. And then my institution, my former institution, had said it was free. So that's how I found out.
Yeah, and really quickly, and kind of going into the next question, I actually did not know about a PhD until my junior year of college. And my siblings definitely went to professional school, but I was largely unaware that you could have a career where you just ask questions and you research and you present and you teach and you get feedback. I kind of liked it a lot when I figured out what it was. But kind of, we have to end, unfortunately. I know this conversation has been going so well. I'm not sure if Ashley's video is
still here. I was looking at the questions. It freezes you when you go through them.
Right. We are ending with the last question, which is by Meskana. And she asked a really, really great question. She said, as Black women, do you believe that we will be able to achieve a safe space in academia and the workforce soon? And I know you asked a couple questions after that, but we'll hold off for now because the questions you ask after is a whole other topic. We just want to make sure we're ending on time.
She can actually DM both of us.
Yeah, you can DM both of us. Or if you want, you can actually DM us on Twitter. I know my DMs are open. I'm not sure if Ashley's are, but
that's not open. But if you tag me in it,
yeah, we can definitely talk to you about that. But just to answer that question really quickly from my perspective, I think we are at a critical moment in time right now where for some reason, everybody now agrees that racism is a real thing. When I say everyone, I mean everyone that is reasonable, right? We still have those who see racism and are like, no, that's not something that I subscribe to, even though it's not about subscribing to something, it's a reality. So, it's 400 years late, but, we're glad people got here. And so I think now it's going to be really up to organizations and folks in power to really push this forward, right? It's, you know, we can protest, we can talk, but this, the burden of having the conversation that eliminates anti-Black racism from institutions, it's really a conversation of dismantling a power system, a system that rests on the power of white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you believe that that's where the power should be, this conversation is a moot point. We can't have this conversation. But if you are thinking critically, okay, actually, it's about reallocating power. And how do we go about doing that? Well, we can't do that as it currently stands. We have to break down something to rebuild something better. And that's something that people need to recognize and internalize and move forward with. And that's what I would say. Until that happens, I don't think the space will be created.
Same. You did everything for me. I mean, it's the same. Same. It's definitely you're absolutely right with the powers that be currently in the United States. Oh, goodness. Goodness. We may have to tear it up again.
Right. But again, we are so glad to have had this opportunity to talk to you all. I'm so glad that Ashley got to talk a lot about her work in Black and Astro, and we're now going to pass it on to Sarah. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley and Anna. This was great. Thank you for the realness that you brought to this conversation and for sharing your personal experiences and all of your advice. It's greatly appreciated. And I hope that this is just the start of some conversations and we can take these back to our institutions and hopefully find a way forward and try to really be supportive and take these conversations further. I quickly wanted to draw your attention to next month's webinar, which will be on Thursday, August 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time again. It will be by Jess Arsenu, and the topic would be how to showcase your CV and a 2-page resume. So I know that some people might be wanting to move from academia to industry. I was struggling personally with trying to write a proper resume. So I hope that you find it helpful as well. Again, thank you so much, Ashley and Anna, for sharing your experiences and your expertise. We really value your time. Make sure you follow them on Twitter and Instagram and reach out to them if you need any more advice or support. I just volunteered you to, paid, not volunteered, to do that. All right, thank you so much, everyone, and we hope to see you next month.
And shout out to Sarah's eyebrows. They are on fleek.
I
know. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful evening. Bye, everybody.
Bye.